What if I told you? The more polished your slides are, the faster your audience zones out, unless you master one overlooked skill. Sounds unfair, right? But it's true. Imagine this. You spend hours perfecting your slides, clean fonts, sharp visuals, every data point in place. But the moment you start speaking, something shifts. The room drifts. Eyes glaze over. Phones light up. You've lost them. Most people think a great presentation is about clear information, that if you sound confident and logical, your message will land. But here's the truth. The brain doesn't respond to facts. It responds to meaning. Did you know? Over 90% of what's said in meetings and presentations is forgotten within a week, not because people aren't smart, but because the message never made them feel anything. In this video, we'll explore why your audience zones out, even when your content is solid, and how one missing skill can change everything. You'll discover the science behind why storytelling isn't fluff. It's biology. It's how we're wired to listen, remember, and care. This isn't just theory. It's the storytelling blueprint behind the world's most unforgettable TED Talks. And in the next few minutes, you'll learn the one thing most presenters never do. That's why their ideas fade, and yours won't have to. Stay with me till the end. Emma had rehearsed this moment 100 times. She walked into the boardroom with everything locked in. Her slides were flawless, the graphs animated smoothly, her tone polished to perfection. This was the pitch she'd been preparing for over a month. The one that could secure $1 million partnership. The room was filled with decision makers, important ones, the kind whose expressions never gave anything away. But Emma had data. She had logic. She had proof. So she launched in. For 25 minutes, she presented every insight with crystal clarity, backed by metrics, market trends, and forecasts. Not a single word was wasted. But about halfway through, something shifted. You know that moment, when you feel the energy in a room drop. One person subtly checks their phone, another stifles a yawn. Someone glances at the clock. Emma noticed but kept going. By the end, polite nods, a few thank yous, but no spark, no follow-up questions, just silence. The next morning, no one mentioned the pitch. She had given them everything, and somehow it hadn't landed. This is more common than you think. Brilliant people walk into rooms with clear, crisp information and walk out unheard. It's not a skill problem. It's not nerves. It's not content. It's something deeper. So what exactly went wrong? And why do smart, capable professionals, just like Emma, keep losing the room? To answer that, we need to look at a strange, invisible gap that hides beneath almost every presentation you've ever seen. And it starts with a sobering statistic. Let's start with this. 90% of what you say in a presentation is forgotten within 1 week. Not 50, not 70, 90% gone. That's not a guess. It's backed by cognitive science. And it's not because people are careless or distracted. It's because our brains are wired to forget anything that doesn't feel essential to survival. So now think about Emma again. She had the data, the polish, the logic, but she didn't give her audience a reason to care. Emotionally, viscerally, biologically, because here's the fault line. Most presentations are built like machines. Precise, efficient, logical. But the human brain doesn't operate like a machine, it operates like a story. And when information is presented without emotional meaning, the brain doesn't absorb it, it endures it. That's why you can sit through a 2-hour meeting and walk out with only one phrase sticking in your mind. And often, it's the one line that made you laugh, feel inspired, or relate to someone's struggle. Not the bullet point, the story. Here's the twist. The most important part of your message isn't what you're saying. It's how your audience's brain receives it. So if facts don't stick, what does? To understand that, we have to travel way back. Not to an office, but to a fire-lit cave tens of thousands of years ago. Now imagine this. You're sitting across from a caveman. You pull out your laptop, open your deck, and start explaining quarterly revenue. How do you think that goes? He stares at you, blankly. Not because he's unintelligent, but because your language, your numbers, your bullet points, none of it means anything to his brain. But here's the twist. His brain is your brain, almost identical in structure. We're walking around with ancient survival software running on modern PowerPoint hardware, and that creates a massive mismatch. Your brain isn't designed to absorb dispassionate facts. It's designed to detect threats, recognize patterns, feel emotions. It craves relevance, emotion, meaning. This is why people say I get the numbers, but it just doesn't land. Because evolution didn't reward remembering charts. It rewarded remembering stories that kept you alive. Like, where was the tiger last seen? What happened when we trusted that stranger tribe? How did Sarah survive the flood? Information wasn't shared in tables, it was shared in moments. And those moments were stories. Today, your audience's brain still works the same way. If your presentation doesn't trigger emotion, pattern, or connection, it gets filed under irrelevant and quietly deleted. But here's the good news. There's one language the brain is built to understand, and it hasn't changed for thousands of years. We'll step into that language next. Let's rewind time. Thousands of years ago, there were no spreadsheets, no slides, no bullet points, but there was fire. And around that fire, stories. These weren't just tales for fun, they were survival maps. If the clouds turn that color, the river will flood. When the birds fly west, the storm follows. That path through the woods, it looks safe, but it's not. In those stories were warnings, wisdom, identity, and those who remembered, lived. Modern neuroscience now confirms what our ancestors instinctively knew. Storytelling isn't decoration, it's a survival mechanism. When you hear a story, not a fact, not a number, but a real story, your brain lights up like a control room. Not just the language centers, but areas tied to movement, senses, emotions. Here's what's even wilder. During a well-told story, the storyteller's brain and the listener's brain sync up. A kind of neural resonance, like music, tuning both minds into the same emotional frequency. This is why we cry during movies, why we feel chills from a stranger's experience, why we remember a fable we heard at age 6, but forget last week's meeting. It's because storytelling releases dopamine during the emotional highs. That's what makes the memory stick. Facts fade, stories imprint. But here's the catch. Not all stories are equal. The best ones are built like emotional engines, with tension, release, and transformation. And one man proved that, before a live audience on stage, with 3 simple phrases. Let's talk about him. Next. San Francisco, January 9th, 2007. The stage is minimal. The man? Casual, black turtleneck, jeans. But what he's about to do will change the world. Steve Jobs steps up and says, "Today we're introducing 3 revolutionary products, an iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator." The crowd applauds, but then Jobs repeats the list again and again. Then he smiles and drops the line, "Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device." Boom! The audience erupts. But pause for a second. What just happened? He didn't rattle off tech specs. He didn't bore us with data. He built tension like a magician, set up expectations, and then shattered them with a reveal. Jobs understood something most presenters never do. People don't care about what a product is. They care about what it means. And meaning is built through narrative, through suspense, rhythm, surprise. Jobs didn't just announce the iPhone. He told a story, a transformation, from separate tools to one unified future in your pocket. This is why that moment became iconic, because it wasn't a pitch, it was a performance. So the question is, if storytelling can sell the most revolutionary device of our time, why are most of us still presenting like it's 1999? Let's pull back the curtain on that. Next. Picture this. You spent hours perfecting every detail. The font is modern, the colors are balanced, your slides glide in with subtle animations. Each data point is clean, well-aligned, backed by facts. And yet, as you speak, you see the eyes glaze over. The occasional nod feels polite, not engaged, and the moment it ends, people pull out their phones, not to text you, but to move on. It hurts, because you did everything right. You were clear, professional, polished. But here's the brutal truth. Clarity without emotion is like a perfectly drawn map to a place no one wants to go. See, clarity is important, but it's not enough. Because information by itself doesn't create meaning. You can give someone GPS coordinates, but if they don't care about the destination, they won't follow you there. This is what most presenters miss. They think the goal is to be understood, but the real goal is to be felt. Think about your favorite TED Talk. Do you remember the bullet points? Or do you remember the feeling it gave you? Clear slides are helpful, but clarity is the skeleton. Story is the soul. And when you strip the soul away, no amount of polish can save your message from being forgettable. So how do you inject emotion into even the driest topics without sounding fake or manipulative? That's where belief-driven storytelling comes in. And the next 3 people we talk about mastered it. In 2009, a man named Simon Sinek walked onto a TEDx stage with a flip chart and a marker. No slides, no graphics, just 3 circles, one inside the other. And one question: why do some people inspire, while others simply inform? He called it the golden circle, and the core idea flipped the business world upside down. What followed didn't just challenge conventional wisdom. It rewired how leaders, brands, and storytellers think about influence. He gave a clear, lucid, and eye-opening observation in his talk. He explained that most people start by talking about what they do. Some get to how they do it, but the great ones, they start with why, because the why is where emotion lives. And emotion, not logic, is what moves people to act. Sinek didn't invent this, he just decoded it. Think of Martin Luther King Jr. He didn't say, "I have a plan." He said, "I have a dream, a vision, and not a proposal." His words painted a future so emotionally vivid that it lit a fire in millions. And then there's Oprah. When she spoke at the Golden Globes, she didn't list stats or argue points. She told the story of Reese Taylor, a woman history tried to erase. And in doing that, she didn't just win the room, she moved it. That's the power of why. Because facts make people think, but stories that begin with belief, they make people feel. And when people feel, they remember, they act, they change. So the question isn't, how do I explain this better? The real question is, why should anyone care? And the answer might change how you talk forever. But here's the good news. You don't need to be a leader or a celebrity to use this. You just need to understand one powerful shift. The move from giving information to offering transformation. And in the next section, we break that shift down. Picture this. 2 managers walk into the same meeting room, same topic, same audience, same time slot. The first one walks up, clicks through 20 perfectly crafted slides, delivers bullet points, charts, and KPIs like a machine. The audience nods politely, but their eyes are glazed over. By lunch, no one remembers what was said. Then the second manager steps up. She begins with a story. A few months ago, we lost a customer, not because we failed on price or speed, but because we didn't listen. That mistake cost us $15 million. Today, I'll show you how we fixed it, and why it'll never happen again. The room leans in, because now it's not just information, it's a transformation. This is the shift most people never make. They believe communication is about transmitting facts, but real influence isn't about facts. It's about friction, about emotional movement. Here's the truth. Your audience doesn't care what you know until they believe it matters to them. Storytelling isn't decoration. It's how humans process meaning, and meaning is what turns a forgettable talk into a transformative one. When someone hears themselves in your story, they don't just understand your point, they feel it. That's what the best TED Talks do. They don't just inform, they ignite. And the difference between those two, it starts with one simple structure, and in the next section, we'll break it down. There's a secret structure behind the most unforgettable stories. It's not complicated. In fact, it's childlike, but it's powerful enough to hold the entire emotional weight of a TED Talk. It goes like this. Once upon a time, until one day, and ever since. 3 simple beats. Beginning, turning point, transformation. Let's see this in action. A woman named Lisa had to deliver the most boring update in the world, a quarterly budget review. She'd done it the usual way before, charts, forecasts, color-coded spreadsheets. Every time, silence and forgetfulness. But this time, she tried something else. She opened with a story. Once upon a time, we were flying high. 30% growth, no questions asked. Until one day, our biggest client pulled out without warning. And ever since, we've been rebuilding. Smarter, leaner, more resilient. And then, she showed them the numbers. This time, her team leaned in. They wanted the data, because the story had already made them care. The story spine gives your message a shape the brain understands, a setup, a break in the pattern, and a new reality. It works in any setting, boardrooms, classrooms, Zoom calls, because our brains are wired not for information, but for change. And change has a rhythm, a rise, a fall, a new world. In the final segment, you'll see how to pull all of this together, because your next presentation isn't just about being heard, it's about being remembered. Think back to the last time someone moved you with words. It probably wasn't because they had perfect grammar or stunning slides. It was because something clicked. You saw yourself in their story. You felt something shift inside. That's the power you hold. Once you stop chasing clarity alone and start chasing connection, all it takes is one shift, one framework, one story, and suddenly what you say doesn't just pass through people's ears. It stays in their chest. It lands. You don't need a film crew. You don't need Hollywood drama. You don't even need to be the most confident speaker in the room. You just need to tell the truth, in a way the brain wants to hear it, because the brain doesn't respond to facts. It responds to meaning. So the next time you open PowerPoint, ask yourself, am I about to inform, or am I about to transform? Because once you learn to build tension like Jobs, speak with purpose like Sinek, and shape emotion like Oprah, you'll realize something extraordinary. Your next presentation, it won't be forgotten in a week. It'll echo in their minds for months. And long after the lights go out and the meeting ends, your message will still be there, not as a bullet point, but as a story they carry forward. So, why do brilliant minds deliver flawless presentations, only to be forgotten the next day? Because the human brain doesn't crave information, it craves transformation. And transformation begins with story. Storytelling isn't fluff, it's neuroscience in action, releasing dopamine to lock in memory, sparking emotion to build trust, and crafting patterns that our brains are hardwired to follow. It's not a presentation trick, it's a human connection code. Remember that executive we met in the beginning? Her data was perfect, but it didn't land, because the room didn't feel her. Once you understand that emotion, not information, is the currency of impact, everything shifts. Your slides may be crisp, but your words, they should echo. If this video made you pause, like it. Subscribe to our channel and share it with someone stuck in the cycle of just presenting. Because we bring you powerful, transformational videos that help rewire your thinking, so you can rise in life, work, relationships, finances, and become who you were meant to be. That's what Metanoia is all about. The shift from knowing to becoming. Thanks for watching.